Hey everybody, welcome to the Insight Cafe. I'm your host, Nikon, and today, I have Mr. William Malek. And so I have to tell you a little about William Malek. His bio is going to be in the description, but just for a brief preview of it, he is a renowned strategic planner and facilitator. He's known for his executable strategies in the realm of building organizational capabilities for innovation and transformation. He's worked with leaders and major businesses and actually all across. He worked all around the world. He worked in 5 different continents. Moreover, he was a top-ranked instructor at Stanford University in the US, and he's an author of Executing Your Strategy, How to Break It Down, Get It Done. And currently, he's the Senior Executive Director at Southeast Asia Innovation Management Research Center. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I brought you on here today because I've gotten really curious about game-changing problems given the state of the world with COVID, and not only just COVID, but the unseen forces that are happening. And I was wondering, well, like how does one even begin to navigate these problems that shift the foundations of our lives and businesses? Because I imagine our traditional way of thinking about it might not be enough. So I'd like to hand this question over to you and explore it with you.
Yeah, so that's a powerful question. It's provocative. And, the first thing that comes to my mind when you look at business or personal life and you look at all of these fundamental shifts that are going on, let's say, around you, the first thing I like to share is that I think you've got to have perspective, that you really need to understand what can you control and what can you not. And what you cannot control, when we talk about, major shifts or changes that are occurring in society, technology, environment, whatever it is, you have to recognize what, in fact, do you have control over. And if you don't, you're going to end up trying to control something you have no possible capacity to deal with. And so this is where you start. I mean, it's an internal perspective as you see the world. And from that orientation, I can begin to limit then what I'm actually able to think about, what I can do with what I can control, how I react to the game changer is as critical as anything. And this is almost kind of a, I hate to say it, but it's kind of a California metaphysical element that if you react to the game changer in a very negative way, it's going to produce a negative outcome. If you react in a positive way, and I'm not talking about being false positive, you hear, they call this about positivity, right? I'm talking about framing it such that you are mindful of it, but you are able to actually frame it in such a way that it's constructive to who you are, what you want to do, and how you want to move forward. So kind of, that's my first step on game changing, and that works in business and it works in your personal life too, I think, at least for me.
I'd love to ask more about that, because what occurred to me is I think traditionally people who think about strategy tend to think about like kind of set formulas and okay, if I apply this to this, this should work. And what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that might not be applicable anymore because things are changing so fast. So I wondered what you've seen about the nature of strategy and approaching things where you don't even know what you can control or not because it's not as clear yet. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so this is, COVID has brought this on in a major way. And this started 2 years ago. And I would get calls from CEOs saying, William, I'm now throwing out my 5-year plan that I paid, millions of dollars to do with a high-end consultant. And our game has changed. And right now, we don't even know what our 90-day plan is. What do we do? And, I can empathize with this because the world that came before COVID was one of, a degree of certainty, a degree of predictability. You could go out and hire people to tell you that if you did these things and you invested in these issues and you look at the market and the landscape of competition, that if you place bets here, you could probably predict within a fairly specific level of probability that you could get close to where you want to go. And while some of that is still true in some businesses, but most businesses, when you think about what's impacted COVID, it's almost systemic. And so now we live in a world where the elements of prediction have changed because there's so many variables acting now. It's not just the virus, it's the healthcare system. It's the employment issue now that's coming up because people are starting to realize they've got a lot more options than they ever had. So this is causing a wave of change. And from a planning perspective, when you look at uncertainty, the best thing you can do is begin to try to frame or design scenarios that are plausible for you and your business. And by going through that, what I'm doing is I'm diversifying my risk by making sure that I actively pay attention to the options that I have, depending on what assumptions come true or not. So we predict the future, think about it, by making assumptions. So what I call is, this form of thinking is assumption-based planning. Now, this has been around, by the way. And you would say, well, why didn't people do this before COVID? The problem before COVID is most plans, if you talk about risk management plans, where what I call, they call them business continuity plans. And business continuity plans were about, you know what, we're going to have an earthquake, our systems go down, how do we get back up, right? Kind of disaster recovery. And those events can be worked out scenarios, with this, but these are what I call wild cards. Nobody knows if there's going to be a typhoon or an earthquake, or you could just name your favorite disaster. But that is not scenario planning. It is in a certain way, but that area was usually covered pretty well by the risk management department. But strategically now, our consumers are shifting, our customer base is shifting, the market is shifting, the technology is shifting, and more importantly, the fundamental shift in the last 5 to 10 years because of access to the internet and ubiquity of smartphones, et cetera, is that it's the customer is now in control of the brand. The customer is now in control of where things are going. And you talk about unpredictable behavior, they used to say the predictability of markets. Now you're dealing with the predictability of consumers and the fast acting, fast moving orientation. And again, welcome to the world of social media and information where movements can happen overnight, depending on what the cause is, what's the purpose, and people gravitate towards things that they feel either there's an injustice or a justice about. And so this incredible speed by which the consumer can move is now an entirely new game for planning. And I've got to be able to now start planning in an entirely different way. And this has hit many companies, like literally like a 2x4 over the head. They're trying to figure out, gosh, how do we live in a world now where the goalpost or the issues start coming up and my assumptions are no longer valid. And so the question is, you have to replan like every single day? Well, no, you have to be much more sophisticated in the way you look at what I'm going to watch for in the marketplace. I call this kind of scanning for insights, scanning for signals, scanning for trends that are emerging out of these signals. That's where the game is played. So the entire discipline of strategy has now become what I call dynamic. It is no longer grab your executive team, let's go off site, go to an island resort, work out the next 5 years with a high-paid consultant in the front with a great big motivator, and have the executive team all charged up to go back to the team. That pretty much, while I think they'll probably still want to do that or they'll bring that in, the real elements of strategy are now dynamically managing a portfolio of decisions that you make on an ongoing basis. I mean, I'm simplifying that, but that's kind of a 3-hour course, if you know what I mean.
A 3-hour course that you can connect with Mr. Malek on for further information. Yeah. I'm curious, in that dynamic way of doing it, what are some of the most helpful things you've seen applied to companies, like case studies or like before after experiences that you've seen that and seen results?
Well, in a very
that
simple,
you can share.
Yeah, in a very simple way. I mean, I've worked with many companies globally, as you mentioned, all over the world, every continent. I've been involved, culturally speaking, highly diverse environments. But more recently, the more recent elements working with large companies in a very practical way. For example, one customer acknowledged that there was not even in the strategic planning area was there anybody that had the role or responsibility to watch what the emergent technologies are outside of the company?
Wow.
So they had people, they had product owners and product technologists. But think about this. Most of the time, those product technologists and project planners are working on current business. They're working on deploying current product strategies, et cetera. They're not out there roaming the internet and roaming the trade associations and roaming the research labs all over the world and academia and government and otherwise, looking for the signals of potential disruption that could occur in their business. And if you have that, you're driving blind. You don't even see your dashboard. And so one company understood this significantly enough in a very simple first step. Hire a person on contract, not full-time, but hire a professional person with high skills and get them outside of the organization. So they're not burdened by the confirmation biases of the internal team. They're not biased by all the thinking that's gone on, but they have an objective of providing a diverse view of the landscape, if you would, of where these signals might be, where these possible outliers of information, while they're not disproven, they're small in number, but they could become very big in terms of how much impact they could have on the business. And as simple as that sounds, that is a huge step in the right direction, because if you don't have the input right, if your input file into the organization is not working well, it doesn't matter what process you put into place, because it's a garbage in, garbage out process for planning, right? So I'll just leave that there. That's one practical element. And one customer, I think they're up for a major award in the way that they used strategic foresight as a tool in which to start helping them think about, how do I manage now uncertainty of fuel supply, the price of oil, and I could go on and on with this, but that's one example I can share with you.
I'd like to riff off that. I think that's so integral to growth, because I think that the problem is most people think they know what's going on, and then it takes someone like you to come in. Has anybody seen that monkey on that tree? I was like, what monkey and what tree? It's like there. And I think it's your ability to see the obviousness of it that is so integral. And it leads me to this next question, which is, I wonder how you help people or leaders or businesses deal with ambiguity and overwhelming complexity. And to segue into that question, you mentioned like large corporations who must be dealing with mountains of complexity and bureaucracy and kind of rigidness. How do you go in there and create the transformation that you do? Or yeah, let's go from there.
Yeah. So the first of all, with everything that might be labeled as complex, okay, one of the tools and one of the skill sets that's emerged, and it's still emerging, and it's emerging incredibly fast, is the need for systems thinking. And by all my good fortune, I mean, I started early, even in high school. When I got to university, I studied as a mechanical, environmental systems engineer. And I really began, I was really blessed by effective professors who said, look, you can't solve a problem linearly if it's a nonlinear problem. So you got to start thinking about systems. And like mechanical electrical systems, they say, you got to watch the output and the variables. And if the variables get out of sync, you got to change the system in order to change the output. And at a very simple level, if you start looking at your business and your organization as a system, you can begin to then understand what are the connection points within the system that you can control, right? This is back, what can you control and what you can't. But in your organization, in your strategy, in your system, I've got to realize what leverage points that I can actually go after in order to affect change somewhere else in the organization or somewhere else in the downstream of how we deliver products and services into the marketplace. And so this orientation of complexity, for me, can best be handled by teaching the teams to map out visually on a board with Post-its. You start with Post-its, very simple, a very crude technology. and have them start to diagram, process, policy, you name it, all the way through, so they can go, that's how our system is now working. Not what it was designed 10 years ago when we started our business, but today with the people we have. And when you can get that happening, I believe complexity, when it can be seen visually in a systems type of visual background, the coherence that can be created in a team to go, I know what that means from my silo perspective or my business unit perspective or my competency perspective. And another person can go, from a finance perspective, this is what this is doing. And through a collaborative conversation, I can find that I can reduce ambiguity, because complex systems are usually multidisciplinary. They are not a single variable cause effect pattern. In other words, linear, right? So ambiguity and complexity, when I'm dealing with collaborative conversations that are structured, by the way, you structure these conversations and go, okay, what do we see here? How do we make sense of what we're dealing with? You bring coherence through dialogue, not by reading a report and then trying to have one person interpret it. It's bringing the collective wisdom into bear. And this is an art. This is a true art to actually do this and allow a team and a decision-making team, or if you're in strategy, it's this capacity for connecting with each other to make sense from different perspectives. What are we seeing collectively? And then making sense out of that.
Right. As you were speaking, what occurred to me was one of my mentor, Steve Chandler, he would say that everybody's results are like a direct result of their system that they might be aware of or might not. And it's so helpful to map it out and to just really see the inputs and the outputs. It also occurred to me to ask, to you, what's control? Like in your mind, what is control?
I used to kind of, kid CEOs, right? And I used to go up to them and say, what do you really control? They scratch their head. They realize, first of all, at the people level, they can't control people.
Right.
Because guess what? You could instantaneously today, because you're not in prison, you're under a social contract where you are free to leave. In some cases, I mean, there might be extraordinary contracts that are, you have golden handcuffs or something, but in most cases, you can't even control your people because they can walk out tomorrow. They can literally decide, I've had enough, I'm leaving, right? So the people thing you cannot control, right? And then I usually get the budget. Oh, okay. You can control the budget. Okay. Now think of COVID.
Right.
That budget control went all out the window. If you don't believe me, just go ask the hospitality industry trying to get back on track here. And even the CEO could not control lack of revenue, and then no money to spend. There's no budget. Yeah. No money coming in. I can't even control that. So if you realize this, what I'm trying to convey is the control is about influencing what the narrative is. I can influence the narrative. How do we see ourselves now as we move into the future, as we deal with ambiguity? What do we want to create? Remember, I talked about you. I
love that. So let me just reflect that so I get it, because I think that was really beautiful. So not controlling things like people or budgets, but I'm choosing the direction of where to go, the narrative of what I want to create, which doesn't exist yet, by the way, but at least I'm choosing to play that game, right? I'm choosing, like, everybody, let's go this way. And I really love that. I'm reading a book called Tribes by Seth Godin, and he talks about how market leaders, like, for example, there have been solutions for like poverty for like long time. And it's one of the solutions somebody created. She won a Nobel Prize. I forgot her name. I'll add it in the description, about microfinance for sub-Saharan countries and like connecting people. And what she did was she created a narrative for people to connect to solve this problem. The solution has been there forever, but the narrative is what made the difference. So I'd love you to expand on that narrative.
Yeah, so this is about, remember I said, there are scenarios that are impacting us, right? We cannot, for the most part, control the elements of what might occur.
Right.
But what we can do with ourselves, our teams, our companies, is to create a story about what is it that we prefer in the future. What do we prefer? Where do we prefer to be in the future? And I'm talking about really ambitional things that I care about, okay? And I argue that if you do that story and you create that as a collective story, and you get people going, yeah, I can get on board with that. I love that. In fact, I know how I can help influence that. I know how I can create value in that. And it's that old saying, people help support that which they help create. So this gets back.
I love that. I love that. And right. And yeah,
the collective.
right.
Use the leveraging of your teams, whether it's your executive team, your business team, your planning teams. When I am engaging with this, I get a lot more engagement. I get a lot more capacity about building a story that really is going. It's going to pull you. You want a story that's going to pull you, not push you.
I love that. Yeah.
Different energy, and it's got a lot of friction and resistance that goes with it when I'm trying to push people. We're going to go this way and push. And you know, I'm reminded of a story because back in the 80s, I did a mission vision workshop for a company, and I don't want to mention this, but the CEO brought me in. He said, you know, we've got people here, they're not quite certain if they should be here, and we've got a really growing business, et cetera. Can you help us come in and help shape what's the vision so that everybody can get on board with it? I'll cut to the chase. I did this, and I did it well, and it turned out of this group of about 150 people, about 15% said, I'm in the wrong company, and essentially walked out within the next 4 months. And that's, now you got to think, these were all what I call critical position people. And a couple, you know, not too long later, after the abandonment occurred with a small group, he called me up and he was cussing. I can't believe I hired you. That I lost so
15 people. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and now I've got HRs all over me, and I've got to repopulate, you know, some very critical positions in my business. And it was just, it's not a good call. I mean, I had to hold the phone up like this because, you know, but the workshop ended with such power because they go, yeah, that's
what
we want, right? But you realize that not everybody is aligned with that, and it's okay. At the end of the story was about a year later, he calls me back up and he says, I've got to apologize profoundly.
Wow.
Remove those 15% opened up potential that the organization has never seen. They now doubled what they were doing, and he attributed it to the fact that that 15% that was not there, they were going to have to be pushed so much time and energy, and they were able to overcome that because who's left were pulled. And that's the big difference in really understanding the power of narrative to kind of galvanize a direction with strategy and so forth.
I love that story. I'm so happy we recorded it. That's really an amazing story that I think so many people could learn from. And when I reflect on that story, I realize that what you just talked about really cuts through ambiguity and overwhelming complexity because it overrides it. It's like, okay, that's cool, these problems, but this vision, it kind of creates its own path that kind of cuts through that ambiguity and overwhelming complexity. I so love that. I'm so happy we captured that. And so I want to guide our conversation to the next part, which is, so we're talking about how to navigate game-changing problems. And to me, that means problems that are happening to us and we have to figure it out, like COVID or earthquakes. However, there's something that you know about in terms of creating disruption for your own growth, right? And like you create the game-changing problem, I don't say problem, but you can't create the game-changing disruption that creates opportunity for you. I would love for you to speak to that and what you've seen about that for business and growth.
Well, what this gets to in a very profound way, personally, is that you've got to decide for yourself, am I going to be a victim? or am I going to be a contributor? And the victims are everywhere. It's just, and I'm not talking about the victims of society who are truly victims of injustice and inequality. I'm talking about a victim of my own thinking and so forth. And what I'm getting to here is that when you look at disruption, you look at the times that we're in, it's a perfect time to reassess. Am I willing to let go of what I thought was stability, because stability isn't there anymore?
Yeah.
Am I willing to now move into a world where I can psychologically understand that uncertainty is not going to kill me? Uncertainty is not going to completely derail me. But if I use the notion that I don't know, okay, if I don't know, and we don't know collectively what will happen or where things are going to go, and we really can't get that. One of the things that starts to become critical as an individual to handle this is open your mind to the possibility of what I call emergent learning. Because if we don't know, it's the unknown unknown. We're in that quadrant where it's better to stay open to the moment. What do we see? Can we see signals for yourself personally? And what does it mean to you? And if I did act on those, I got to take a little bit of risk in order to understand. I take a risk by doing nothing. In a world where I was stable and I had a good paycheck and everything looked good and the business was going on, I've got a risk now of doing nothing because that predictability isn't there. So I've now got to figure out how to what degree am I willing to be okay with not knowing. This requires an entirely new skill of learning, and this is not easy. I myself am still going through this going, oh, I caught you trying to rationalize something you learned 20 years ago.
I do it too.
No longer even relevant. Let it go. And that first movement allows me, okay, I can let go of something that no longer is relevant for me. And such a powerful moment. Personally speaking, it's just the energy, the insights that you get, because it just clears the mind, and the mind opens up to see things that it never seen before, and they were staring you right in the face.
Right. It occurs to me, I was speaking to a group of students in upcountry Thailand, and actually to echo what you just talked about, they were kind of stuck in overwhelming complexities, like how do I get into university? What do I do? How do I get into this job? And the teachers asked me, can you say something to the kids, this closing speech? And I said, kids, I really want you to just forget about your dreams. And all these teachers kind of like looked at me like, okay, this better be real good, Nicon, like whatever. And the kids kind of went Scooby-Doo. And I said, I really want you to enjoy being 16, like enjoy being a student and enjoy the hell out of your education. Because the truth is, you have no idea what the world's going to look like in 4 years and 5 years. There might be completely new professions that have not existed, or things you might learn about yourself along the way. And I think that really points to emergent learning, like be here now and see what happens. And I think it does take kind of a gutsy, because I think we're so trained, and it kind of, I think maybe our primitive mind is so trained to look out for danger and like, okay, I need to be safe. I need to be safe. I'd love for you to expand on what this has what emergent learning has looked like for you in application in business and working with leaders. Because I'm sure there are people like, what do you mean with I got to be safe? I got to know my 5-year plan. Like I remember in one of our conversations, one company talked about having a 150-year legacy plan, right? Like this totally might be disruptive to that.
Yeah, and it's I guess the best way to put this is it's a paradox. The paradox is we want to think about the future because we anticipate, we want the certainty to be there that if I do A, B, and C, I'll get to outcome E and G or whatever, right?
Right.
And in a world where this, to this point, to the comment to the 16-year-old is, if I try to control the future today, right, I get anxiety.
Right. Immediate anxiety. Right? Yeah.
And then you lose the essence of life, because it's as I've told people, have you ever experienced the future? And
Yeah.
nobody,
Nobody.
I have never experienced the future, because the only thing that's happening is right now,
Right now.
all the time. There's nothing but right now. So if I can really let go again, right? Let go of that inculcation that we get when it starts early in schooling, and oh my God, in family and community and society is all about, oh, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'm 6 years old. What?
I'm 6. Yeah, I'm 6. I'm 16. Yeah.
I want to play, and this is why a child is a very good
Yeah.
example of that freedom of creativity and genius, because they're not thinking about, I'm going to be a doctor when I'm 20 years old. There are some kids that do that, but the power of emergent learning is to be conscious of being in the moment. And I'm going to share this with you as I used to do this at Stanford, and it was uncanny. And I got this experiment right when it came out, and this is world famous. You can Google it, but it's about the the underpinning psychological research on this was about inattentional blindness, which how can I be blinded by, and all the information is in front of me, but my mind, my decision-making capacity is blinded by what I'm focusing on. So if you're focusing on the future, your mind is not in the space of here and now. And what this experiment is about, and you might have heard of this, this is done, I think, at the University of Michigan. They're out in a dorm room in front of an elevator, and there's 2 teams, white shirts and black shirts, and they've got a basketball. And the exercise for the observer is to count how many times the team with the white shirt is passing the basketball. Okay, so you're and the instruction is, you will be successful if you count the number of times the team in the white shirt passes the basketball. Very clear. One shot or one pass is 1, right? So tell me how many times. So they run the video, and it goes through it, and it's kind of a little like basketball. It's random and passing it through, but you got to keep your eye on the ball. You have, the mind is being cued what the exercise is. Now, what happens in this is this black gorilla in a costume, obviously, walks right through the middle of the entire scene of this going on. And then after the exercise, the facilitator says, well, how many of you, how many of you saw 14 balls? Please raise your hand. How many saw? And you do a graph. And you find out that you never get a perfect answer, especially in a large group. You get a diversification, you get like a distribution and so forth. And a few people would get the number right, but then you ask the people that actually got the number right, how many of you actually saw a black gorilla?
Right.
And they look at you like, what? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And then I reset the instruction. I said, you know what? Let's watch the same video again. But now I'm going to tell you right now in the moment, I'm going to cue you differently. I said, I still want the number. I still want to know how many times the team, but now what I want you to do is relax. And I want you to also observe the entire environment. I want you to see differently. I want you to take in everything beyond. Now that you know what the task is, I want you to see. And sure enough, you rerun the video, and the same video, and this time people go, no way, you switched the video.
You switched the video.
Changed the video. And I'm illustrating this point because this is how powerful our minds are. It creates almost what we want to see by the instruction that we give the operating code, if you would. And this is such a deep psychological phenomena that if you really recognize what it means to be relaxed, to be open, to be there, you will see more creative opportunities than you've ever seen before. And companies that are doing this now are literally growing through COVID. They're not dying, they're growing because they were able to let go and then see the world in an entirely different view. And their operating instructions have been modified that they don't have to do what they did. And by just allowing that, the whole presence of your participation and creativity go right up. It's just a radical shift in terms of how you look at being present in the moment to recognize what can we see, what is here in front of me. The gorilla was just a small meme. It's an example of it. But now I add the complexity of all these other things going on in society and the world about my business, and in order to look at how do I take the next step? Who am I? And what do I see? What do we collectively see? And how do we make sense of that? That's kind of the net of this.
I have a case study to illustrate exactly what you just talked about. I was working with a property sales business in Bangkok, and they were extraordinarily good at what they did. And of course, COVID happened, and after the spike, everything went on sale, right? Like all the properties and condos. And after that sale went, business really quieted down. And they brought me in to do exactly what you talked about. Like, can you help us expand our minds and see what we're not seeing? And we just really worked on how to quiet their minds and really be creative in their work, and kind of notice where they had put up barriers to what they were allowed to think and do. And after about 2 months, the lady called me and said, "You'll never believe what happened." So through connections and just through noticing opportunities, she had connected with these property development companies. And then she had raised her hands like, "Hey guys, before you like launch this thing, I think it'd be helpful if I gave you my input on what actually sells and what doesn't." So then she got these consulting gigs to help these companies really use her data sets from her company of what sells, what doesn't. And now she is a profound consultant for property development companies on how to develop things like units and like architecture that actually sells. And she loves it. And she said, then when we were reflecting on it, she said, it really shifted because she was so focused on trying to solve her sales problems. But when she opened her perspective, she saw a whole new market for her business. So, and she made millions of dollars. And so to exactly what you're saying is, relaxing has a profound impact on your bottom line. It's not just like California, just relax, dude. It's like, no, really relax. Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, it's, and you can call it what you want, mindfulness, awareness. It's a state of being where, I'll put it this way. I like to say it's connecting the heart-mind connection. Because when I can think more holistically and focus on the center of my being and my where I think my brain is in my head, but the fact is it's much larger than that. If you read all of the mind-brain connection research, et cetera, once you start feeling that, you get an entirely different sensation experience of what is this? What is the world that am I looking at? Why are these things happening? And that framing puts you into a deeper state of emergence. I can see this now, right? My unconscious is bringing up things that I remembered when I was, 6-year-old selling lemonade on a stand on a hot day. I mean, I'm exaggerating that, but the point being is that in that state, emergence is far easier.
Right. And I want this last part that I want to ask you, because I think what you just talked about segues into this, which is I just realized as you were telling the Stanford experiment with the gorilla, like the Michigan experiment with the gorilla and the basketballs, is I realized that leaders are like that. They have so much stuff coming at them and they're trying to count the basketball passes that they not only see the gorillas, they don't see the tigers, the lions, the trees. And we put so much pressure on them to make these decisions every single day. And in a previous conversation, you've shared with me how decentralized decision-making has been you've seen profound impacts of taking the pressure off these leaders to make all decisions and giving these decision-making powers to different areas of the business. I would love for you to speak to that because I think it's so helpful.
Yeah, so this is to me, this is a trend. I would still say it's very early, it's very embryonic. There are a small number of companies, both small and large, some very large ones that are using the idea that I don't need to make the decisions. And in fact, if I can run more experiments than the competition, I will actually have a better outcome. So this is actually known in, there's a Nobel Prize on this about portfolio theory, and I'm cutting it short. Like if you diversify the number of bets you make, you're reducing your risk. And it's just common sense, but it took a Nobel Prize to kind of raise this, right? And if I realize that, if I can run more experiments where some will fail, but some are going to win, and some are going to win really big, right? There are
Right,
some
right.
times when you let go to the point that the amount of decision making on different angles of your strategy are allowed to be decentralized. It's a paradox. You actually feel I'm giving up control of the decisions about what we're going to do, but in fact, I'm actually allowing portfolio theory to now work on my behalf, because I'm not locked down to a small group with confirmation bias of any sort, including executives that have proven themselves, including their boards, got the company to where they are today, but the world they're moving into tomorrow, the best people to talk to are the people on your front lines with the customers who are paying for your purchases. And if you don't engage them, right, or allow them to help form those decisions, you lose out. And now my portfolio theory is now, it's much tighter and higher risk, because I'm allowing just a few people to go, okay, well, we think it's this, this, and this, and you begin to get this, what I call the anchoring bias of our history. Starts to go, well, we never did that, and if we do this, we're going to lose, et cetera. Count all of the possibilities of experiments that could be radically changing and upgrading the business and the strategy simply by having more experiments going on. So the decentralization of decision making to teams that, and you just don't, you got to plan this through. You got to have a systematic plan to put in process to allow this to occur with what I call guardrails of policy, but you've got to allow experimentation in times of rapid change and disruption. If you don't do this, your risk goes right up. And I'll tell you what, stock analysts know this, and they're now starting to short sell companies when they find out that they're myopic and who's making decisions at the top. Oh, we're going to short sell that because it's too much risk.
Wow.
They start to play. They double down on other companies that are running more experiments.
Right.
And, venture capitalists know this. The venture capitalists have been doing this forever. But now in the corporate world, it's now that uncertainty factor is really starting to play, and it's a game that they're going to have to learn.
I just realized they made a whole movie about what you just described. It's called Moneyball with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, right? That's exactly what you're talking about. And it like, I think everybody who's watching this needs to go watch that movie now, and you will see it illustrated. And the synopsis is Jonah Hill is like a data science, like a data guy, and he runs probabilities of players who can reach bases and hit balls, but they don't have them. They might not look on paper like the other great like branding guys that other people have. And then Brad Pitt, who's the manager, trusts this guy against the pushback, right? The general, which is, I imagine, the anchoring thing, wait, we can't let this guy decide who we're going to get, but it works out great, and they end up winning these games that they should not have been able to win. And it's so subtle. And I guess the question that occurs to me to ask you is, why do leaders hang on so tight to decisions? What do you make of that? Why do we kind of, it's like, no, I can't let go of this decision. It's mine. What do you make of that?
It's I've seen it for so many years, and I guess the best way to think about this, I feel empowered because I've been successful. I feel empowered because I've achieved getting to, a decision maker role, let's say, okay? And if my identity gets wrapped up in my success or in my position, I am unlikely, if my identity is wrapped up in my position of power, influence, etc., and my role is my identity, not who am I am more likely to not make a change because I am protecting my role or what is perceived to be me acting in that role. And one of the greatest challenge with executives when they talk about, well, what are we going to have to do to make the change? I said, well, it's not the organization. That's right. And if you don't get this, right, this is about you also engaging in the caterpillar becoming the butterfly again for the third time in your life, right? And for some executives, they don't want to do that again. It's a lot of work in some cases, but I suggest that if you let go and you're mindful, it is actually a playful, joyous experience. Planning can, if it's really done right, the power in planning is unlocking human creative potential. And by doing that with a group, you can let go of your own need to be right. And that's an environment, that's a system element. So I need a system to surround that individual that wants to control it. They're so damn sure that they know exactly what But remember, you don't really have control over too many things. And therefore, why not diversify your portfolio? Do more experiments, allow more people into the dialogue, and let a lot more disagreement happen. You know, in Thailand, this is a very cultural, almost no-no, because
conflict bad.
Oh my God, I'm going to disagree with my boss. Oh, I'm going to look bad. You know, space. Oh no, there's no chance.
Right, no chance.
So it takes courage.
I read this, I read this thing on LinkedIn that said that when people are psychologically safe, they in workplaces, they say, I disagree. Can we try this? Can we look at this again? And it's those things, right? And I also see the need for systems, because if you're going to hand these decisions to these people, they kind of need to know it's safe to make mistakes, because they're like, wait, oh, like, are you sure? And you're like, go ahead, make a mistake. Yeah, but am I going to get fired? You know, like, there needs to be communication and systems. And I really, really see that. I think what you're talking about is alchemical gold for people who are hearing it, who can really connect with you and apply this to their businesses. Yeah. All right. So as we're kind of wrapping this up, I'd love to ask you that if you were to give a gift, it could be a knowing, it could be your own insight to people listening in terms of approaching game-changing problems or being the change. What would you say? What would you give to them?
Wow, great question. You know, so what comes immediately to mind is, before you act, take some time off. But take the time off with intention. Take the time off with intention to assess, how are you feeling? Where are you? Where have you gotten to? You know, back to like, where do you want to end up? Kind of my ambition kind of thing. And with that recalibration occurs, right? By allowing yourself downtime, slack time. And I say this because, and many people know this, and many people experience this every day. And I always ask people, I said, where do you get your most creativity? And interestingly, it's not in a workshop being facilitated going through brainstorming.
Yeah.
Literally, I'm out walking my dog on Sunday morning and I am not worried about work. And then all of a sudden you get 15 ideas just start coming to you, because it's you, nature, and the dog, and you're in the moment.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're thinking, your neocortex, right? It just kind of, it's asleep a little bit, but you start to really feel, oh my gosh, you know, I've never thought about that, or I'm seeing something different for the first time. So by taking time off in a world that we live in now, to the degree that you can, and even in small bites, right? It's in that moment of relaxation, if you would, back to that, to really recognize that the brilliant breakthrough, you know, as they say, a moment's insight is sometimes worth a life's experience.
I love that.
I have had that as a quote. I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes or somebody, I can't remember, but you know, that is so true. And if you can create an environment where you can get an insight that's worth a lifetime of experience, simply because you begin to see things differently, it will change you, it will change the people around you, and it will change your company, period. People will go, what happened? What did you do? Oh, I took some time off.
I went for a walk.
I had an insight that was worth a lifetime experience. And here's now how I feel. I had this change. I was able, if I've got game-changing stress around me, I can create a change in my own game by allowing it to observe. And it's just like, I don't have to fight it. I don't have to push it. I allow it to emerge naturally. So take some time off.
I love that. Quotable. And lastly, I'd love for you to tell us where people listening who are interested to engage you in work or to connect with you, where can we find you? Where can we hang out with you?
So the best way to go immediately is go to LinkedIn. It's got all my profile, what my current status is on everything. And you can ping me there, instant message you there. That's the best way. I really don't do the other social media. It's just, I've got too much.
I will put all that in the description. So I'll take care of that. Yeah, this has been a profound conversation. There's been so many insights that I got, and so many, I think, in internal confirmations that I almost like, I needed you to say it for me, like, yeah, see, like that, like that was the thing that, and I think your foresight and reflections, I think, are so valuable to anybody listening for decision making or trying to overcome overwhelming complexity and ambiguity. Super helpful, and thank you so much for your time and wisdom in this podcast.
You're welcome, and thank you for the great questions to keep it real and spontaneous. I appreciate it.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you later.